Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's tutorial. Now today we want to look at the ear. Remember that the ear, apart from hearing, it's also an organ for balancing. Now, not only the ear forms part of the system, but also an important nerve, cranial nerve 8, that's the vesible cochlear nerve, as well as the primary auditory center in the temporal lobe. Now we said that the ear is actually going to be housed in a particular important aspect of the bone known as the temporal bone. So for orientation, this is the superior aspect, this is the inferior aspect, this is the external aspect, and this, as you move this way, you come to the inner aspect. Now, for orientation, this is the mastoid process of the temporal bone, which is breast-shaped. And that because of its proximity with the middle ear, that's why if you have middle ear infections, it can also cause mastoiditis, which this area gets filled with pus filled cysts, which is very painful. Now this is the pen-like process known as the styloid process. Now this is one of the components. Now remember that the ear is actually organized into three parts: an outer ear, a middle ear, and an inner ear. Now this is one of the components of the outer ear, and this one can also be known as the pinna. Now it's having an inferior portion known as the lobule or the ear lobe, where it's actually made of fats and skin, but the superior portion is actually made of elastic cartilage, so making it pliable, flexible. Now superiorly, we are having what we call helix. Now this helix actually presents with a crus, so this is the crus or leg-like process of the helix. Now on the helix, around this area posteriorly, sometimes there will be that kind of tubercle formed here, a prominence here, known as Darwin's tubercle. Now, on this helix, sometimes, as well as even the lobule, sometimes hair will grow here, and that condition is known as hypertrichosis pennae. It's actually a sex-linked disorder, which is found in the Y chromosome. Now, if you come to the inner aspect, this is the antihelix, and the antihelix is having a superior crus and an inferior crus. These are the leg-like processes. Now, in between the helix and the antihelix is this scapha. Now, in between the superior crus of the antihelix and the inferior crus is a triangular fossa. Now, as we come, inferior from the crura, what we have is the tragus, and below, the antihelix will be the antitragus, and in between them will be an intertragal or intertracheal, notch. Now, in the inner aspect, we are having the concha or the concha, and the concha is having a superior portion known as cymba and an inferior portion known as cavum. Now, the pinna, sometimes it may become small, and we call that condition microtia. If you are having microtia, then it's going to impede the transmission of sound. It's going to minimize the sound that enters the ear. Now the pinna, what it does is that it collects the sound waves and focuses it or concentrates it into what the next part of the outer ear, known as the external acoustic meatus. Now, yes, in the same way as microtia can occur, which is congenital, you can also have macrotia. It can be very large. Now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure a lot of the ears have been modified. And for the earlobe, some individuals have the fixed earlobe, and others have the free earlobe. so that is faced to the skin, yes, on the head. Now, the next one that we find is the external acoustic meatus. And this external acoustic meatus actually, yes, transmit the sound waves to the next one, which we look at the eardrum. This is the external acoustic meatus, and it's actually, yes, it's also having some elastic cartilages. Even apart from that, it's having skin, which, you know, contains what we call ceruminous glands, which are modified apocrine glands. And what they do is that they are going to secrete what we call cerumen. And this cerumen is actually earwax. Now this earwax can sometimes be overproduced and get compacted in this place, leading to what we call, as far as, you know, the conduction of the sound is concerned, impaired sound conduction. Now, sometimes there could be bacterial infection, usually, or it could be fungal, leading to inflammation of this portion, known as what we call otitis externa. Yes, otitis, you know, has to do with inflammation of the ear, so external part of the ear. Now, the third component of the outer ear is this membrane, known as tympanic membrane, or the tympanum, or the eardrum. Now, this eardrum is actually serving as a transition between the outer ear and the middle ear cavity. And this one is having that portion which faces the external ear and another portion which faces the middle ear. Now, what it does is that it vibrates and it increases the sound, the intensity of the sound waves. Now, remember that, look at the size of this, and we look at another portion which is known as the oval window. We look at that one is small. Look at this size. Now, at this point, it is actually, you know, the middle ear is therefore having these components, having these ossicles. And these ossicles are the smallest bones in the body. They are actually part of the axial skeleton. They are found in the ear. These ossicles, simply with the mnemonic MIS, will help you know them. So, malleus, incus, and then there's a third one known as stapes, which will actually take attachment from here. Now, this stapes is actually going to have, you know, some crura, and then it will have a foot process which will tap on an important component of the inner ear, known as the oval window. Now, or simply because of their shape, we can call the malleus hammer, the incus anvil, and then the stapes stirrup. Now, what happens is that the stapes, the stapes, which is the smallest bone in the body, is actually held in place by this muscle, which is the smallest muscle in the human body, known as Stapedius muscle. Stapedius muscle. So that upon contraction, yes, it will actually cause further vibration as it taps on the oval window. Yes, but just get to know that there's another muscle, which is, tensor tympani. This tensor tympani actually is connected to, you know, the malleus, so that upon vibration also, cause further vibration to what we call the eardrum. Now, around this area, there's a tympanic cavity, or the middle ear cavity. So connecting this area to the nasal cavity, yes, to actually the nasopharynx, is the pharyngotympanic membrane, pharyngotympanic, or the eustachian tube, so that it can help equilibrate pressure between the middle ear and the nasal cavity. Especially when you move from one altitude to another, then there is supposed to be that equilibration of pressure between the two, so that even when you are in an airplane, as you move, you can be chewing gum or you can be swallowing saliva to help in that regard. Now, the next thing that we will talk about is going to be the inner ear. And this inner ear actually consists of these two main components. It is having this vestibular apparatus, and it's having this hearing apparatus. This is actually for balancing. And we can see these three bones, which are semicircular in nature, known as semicircular canals. Therefore, we are having what we call an anterior semicircular canal, a posterior semicircular canal, and a lateral or horizontally placed semicircular canal. Now, these ones are actually filled with what we call perilymph, because they are contain outer body labyrinth, perilymph, and then lining within them will be the semicircular duct, which is actually filled with endolymph and inner membranous labyrinth. Now, at this distal portion, inferiorly, we are having this dilated region known as the ampulla of the semicircular duct. And this ampulla contains what we call crista ampullaris, so that upon vibration of the fluid, it can help in what we call dynamic equilibrium as one moves. Now, this area is known as the vestibule, which is also made of outer bony labyrinth, and it's also going to have what we call perilymph. Now, at this region, we find these two dilated portions. Now, the upper portion is known as utricle, then the lower portion is known as sacule. Now, within them, they contain what we call macule, and these macules actually, yes, they also contain an inner membranous labyrinth, which will contain endolymph. And they are actually going to help in what we call static equilibrium when you are stationary. Now, the next portion which we will talk about is this structure, which is called, and in fact, this structure, which is called shaped like that of the snail, is known as cochlea. Now, this cochlea is actually going to have three main chambers, which we call them scalar, vestibular, which is an outer bony labyrinth, and therefore contain perilymph. It also contains scalar media, and this scalar media actually contains what we call the basilar membrane, which below it will have the organ for hearing, which is known as the organ of Corti, spiral organ of Corti. The spiral organ of Corti will have some sensory hair cells which will help in hearing. Now, over here is actually the scalar tympani, made up of an outer bony labyrinth and therefore contain perilymph. Remember that the scalar media will contain endolymph. Now, sometimes, yes, this one may become, fractured, or there may be some pathological issue, so that one may not be able to hear. Therefore, will require a cochlear implant. Now, remember that we said that the stapes, the food process of the stapes, will tap on an important aspect of the inner ear, known as the oval window, so that those vibrations will be sent to the cochlea. Now, remember that we saw the difference between the size of the eardrum and the size of the oval window, so that, yes, because there will be small area, the pressure here will increase, because over here, as air goes through it, it's just air. Therefore, the impedance or resistance to flow of sound is less compared to this fluid filled area, which is the cochlea, and therefore there's high impedance, which will have to be, the pressure will have to increase, amplify the vibrations. All right, but below that is this window known as round window, the smaller one, and this round window prevent the rupturing of the cochlear duct, yes, so that you prevent what you call scattering of the sound waves. Now, finally, yes, with this happening, there is supposed to be that nerve which will convey it to the auditory centers in the brain, and this nerve is known as vesibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve 8, having this portion which actually takes, this is the cochlear portion because sending it to the cochlea, and this area is the vestibular portion which is sending it to the vestibular apparatus. So this is mainly for hearing, the cochlea, the organ of Corti, importantly, with the vestibular apparatus, yeah, the semicircular canals and their ducts, as well as the utricle and circulum. So essentially, these nerves will convey the information to the auditory centers in the ear. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a quick tutorial as regards the ear. Thank you very much for your audience.